Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast, part of the Foul Territory Network. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, as we record this episode on Sunday, July 26, 2026. Lots to discuss as the Chicago White Sox just wrapped up their series against the Houston Astros, a losing series. They lost 2 out of 3. We'll talk about that regarding the sixth inning issues the White Sox faced in both Friday and Saturday's loss. Munetaka Murakami, not only does he have sushi in his honor, but he also got a bobblehead and had a huge day on Sunday. We'll be talking about that. But first, we have some breaking news from the Chicago White Sox on the trade front. That breaking trading news for the Chicago White Sox comes from Robert Murray, and Robert Murray first reported and confirmed by our James Fegan at Sox Machine that the Chicago White Sox are acquiring pitcher Jose Urquidy from the Pittsburgh Pirates. Urquidy has spent most of the season with the Indianapolis AAA affiliate for Pittsburgh as he started 17 games there with a 3.66 earned run average in 83 innings this season. Urquidy has 73 strikeouts. His last appearance in the major leagues was back in April for Pittsburgh. So why did the White Sox make this trade, or what exactly is the latest? Well, I am now joined by my partners in crime, Sox Machine's beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. And hello, gents. James, you were able to confirm as far as the trade the White Sox made with Pittsburgh for Urquidy. What do you know about this deal?
Well, I mean, now it's official. Obviously, kind of going for a DSL reliever. He had been recently DFA'd off their AAA roster, and from what I was told, he's going to the White Sox AAA roster. So, his numbers are AAA are decent. He hasn't really got lit up at working in relief back in April for Pittsburgh. Um, but it sounds like he's stretched out. He hasn't made a major league start since 2023, given all the injuries, and he was a solid like mid rotation guy for the Astros back in the day. But at this point, it sounds like he's minor league depth of the bulk or stretched out sort. So obviously the White Sox rotation is in flux. We don't know like how many more bites of the apple like Noah Schultz is going to get. And, certainly they're looking to add a starter is probably their biggest priority in the deadline. I don't yet know how Urquidy fits beyond organizational depth at this point, though. We will see.
Got it. All right. So doesn't sound like much, Jim. What are your thoughts about this deal for the White Sox?
Yeah, the only thing I can think of in terms of like why he jumped out, aside from just being DFA'd and being front of mind, is that he has shoved against the White Sox in 2 of his 3 outings against the White Sox in easy 7 innings both times in 2021, 2022. 2023 was more ordinary. Like I think he threw like 4 innings at that point, but that's when the shoulder injury started to set in, and then he had Tommy John surgery that cost him 2 years. So probably a different version than what the White Sox have seen overpower them in previous years, but they have gotten a look at him when he's at his best. And that's still probably better or a different kind of pitcher than the White Sox currently have in Charlotte. They really don't have the kind of veteran arm that they can just use to fill innings that they can push that has been through the ringer. Like a lot of these guys in Charlotte, limited to 5 innings. Sometimes they go six at most, but you're seeing like a weird amount of bulk guys in Charlotte. So I think it just helps to have somebody down there who can throw five, six, maybe even beyond that if he's cruising, and not really have to worry about any kind of long-term developmental ramifications.
I guess from my perspective, a lot of White Sox fans be like, okay, so Charlotte needs pitchers. What's the next move? And I think we're all waiting to see what that next move is for the White Sox. But someone on social media was complaining that the White Sox must see that Eric Fetty gives up too many home runs, and there's got to be a better option. We've talked about it the last couple of weeks, listeners. The internal starting pitching depth for the White Sox is really shallow at the moment. So hopefully your Urquidy can help at least build up some depth in Charlotte. I don't know if that makes anyone, if that exposes them to possibly being dealt. We'll see. The trade deadline again is on August 3rd. Lots of pieces are going to be moving. We'll see if any of consequence for the White Sox. Now for the Chicago White Sox, recapping as far as the series loss to the Houston Astros, even though they won big on Sunday, 12-3, the most painful loss, or one of the most painful losses this weekend, happened on Friday night as the Chicago White Sox were up 5-0, and then a car crash of a sixth inning in which the Chicago White Sox allowed 8 runs. And then on Saturday, scoreless game, Hunter Brown was dealing, Sean Burke was dealing, and then yet again, the sixth inning comes back and burns the White Sox as they give up 3 runs in that frame. Here is White Sox manager Will Venable sharing his thoughts on those 2 losses for the White Sox.
I mean, obviously the first one, sixth inning got away from us. Thought we did a good job offensively. Had to solve for a bunch of different guys after Getty went out. Yeah, just kind of a tough one. And then yesterday, a little bit different where we just got beat. We got beat by a guy with really good stuff that pitched as well as he's probably pitched all year, and just couldn't really figure him out. So yeah, couple tough games. We got an opportunity today, which we're excited about.
Now, when it comes to the sixth inning issues for the Chicago White Sox, again, they gave up 8 runs on Friday, 7 hits, 3 walks, and they hit a batter. And then on Saturday, 3 runs, 2 hits, hit another batter, a walk, and then a very costly error by Brady Montgomery as he just missed as far as the ball rolling under his glove on a single that ended up clearing the bases. And when it comes to the Chicago White Sox and this sixth inning issue, I immediately start thinking about, listeners, the TTOP, times for the order penalty. And for Davis Martin on the mound, Davis Martin's been excellent the first time through the order. Opposing hitters are just hitting 206. They're slugging just 265 and an on-base percentage of 246. That's fantastic. But things drastically change when Davis Martin faces a lineup a second time. That batting average increases to 293 against, and his on-base percentage against is 372. And the third time to the order doesn't really dip. 287 batting average, 350 on-base percentage against Davis Martin. The slugging percentages are still in the 400s. They haven't exceeded in the 500s yet against Davis Martin. But that's pretty drastic. And when you look at Sean Burke as far as his T-top, first time through the order, very good, below 300 in all 3, 207 batting average against, just a 289 on base percentage in the first time through the order. Second and third time, batting average very close to the same, 254 and 250, on base percentages 320, 313. Sean Burke's pretty consistent against opposing lineups when he faces them a second and third time. So it's a little bit different for both of them. But this is something that I do wonder here, James, moving forward, because Davis Martin is on track to pitch and it set a new career high for him in a season of innings. And we've been asking the White Sox to do something to pad as far as the starting rotation. Are there any T-top concerns moving forward in how we watch these Chicago White Sox starters?
Well, I mean, yes. Third time to the order affects everyone. It's kind of the greatest challenge in starting pitching. It's kind of like, how do you prevent the rain from falling? Like, yeah, it'll be the most difficult part of everyone's outing every single time. What really separates, their reliable starters, even what kind of separates Martin and Burke even from K a little bit in terms of like how regularly they get allowed to go third times to the order, and certainly separates them from Schultz and Fetty, and like that they don't really attempt to do that at all is the difficulty of that. But as far as like Martin's not like, I think what's maybe affecting him or in the second half is like you just haven't necessarily seen the stuff tick up to what it was earlier in the season. But like the natural nature of Martin's like arsenal is that he's throwing 6 different pitches at you, that he can, has a wide enough arsenal that he's cycling through. He's showing you a different plan of attack every time through. So he's sitting more 93, 94 and just kind of is more vulnerable. But recently he felt like in general, we were talking to post game Friday that, and I think it's evidenced by like the walks and controls that he's shown since coming out of the break, is that he feels like his mechanics are trending up, and that they did address the spots in his delivery that he wasn't felt like he was getting into as the break held. So like he feels like the first 2 starts, and especially like looking at that game, like both the 6 innings really blew up on them, and I think teed around hit by pitches of batters that they felt like they could get out with Burke and Martin. And once they did that, they kind of removed their margin for error for batted ball luck, and Martin gets killed by 2 ground ball singles, and Um, then the Christian Walker bases clearing double that like Vargas thought was foul was unreviewable. Like it's really those extra base runners, which one was the flaw in his game that he couldn't work around. At the end of the first half, and he was flagging, and kind of the thing that was the straw that broke the camel's back in this. So Burke, if anything, is shrinking his arsenal because I was talking to him recently that he's kind of banged his changeup, but that's mostly reflective of the fact of how good his curveball is working. And he was the same thing. Like he's been great third time through the order. Like he's kind of builds his velocity up over the course of the game, where you see more 96, 97 as he goes on. It's usually like I think we've gotten to the point where like his first pitch will be 92 and you kind of shrug it off and see him build up from there. And it kind of reminds me of Lucas Giolito a little bit in the sense of like this big long levered guy who kind of gets more in sync 15 to 20 pitches in than he is at the start, which lines up to how much he kind of struggled in the first inning early in his career. I mean, his inning really, like his third time trip to the order, like really blew up because of defense. Like obviously he hit the batter to kind of remove it where a defense could hurt him to a degree, but like Colson not getting to the grounder that, at least for the great defense he played the first season and a half of his career, you kind of are used to him getting, even if it's challenging to turn a DP off of that. And then Braden kind of whiffing on one that you saw him drilling like the exact same play pregame Sunday in response. I think without those, he kind of looks like regular old Burke again, but will 3 times through the order be hard? It'll always be hard. It's the hardest thing in sports, or at least the hardest thing in pitching. I just ignore other sports entirely. But yeah, I think it's a challenge for him. I think like these are, the creme of the rotation, but David Smart and Sean Burke are not like proven playoff starters or proven guys who like are awesome at the end of 180 inning seasons in September, not because they can't do it, because they've not done it before. And so much like with this White Sox pitching core is just unestablished in that way. And so that's something to watch going forward, but it's also it's the fundamental challenge. I don't think like they'll ever not have third time through the order numbers that are worse than the rest of their selection, unless something really is going on with their year where they're struggling out of the gate in some way. That's really the issue, and not third time through the order. Like that's the nature of the beast.
Shop the 2026 All-Star Collection now at the new look FoulTerritoryShop.com. The drop features every All-Star, including Munetaka Murakami, Miguel Vargas, and Tristan Peters. Keep an eye out for more officially licensed gear throughout the rest of the season and playoffs at FoulTerritoryShop.com.
You never know when you might be involved in an accident, so please put my number in your phone, 312-6-million. Injury law made personal, that's Ankin Law.
So what is the best way for Will Venable and the Chicago White Sox to manage these T-top situations where it doesn't impact them as much as it did this weekend?
I think this last time out, the one thing that Venable might have done differently is either have Hudson come in a batter earlier or a batter later, having him come in with the bases loaded against a righty and Christian Walker. Probably not the ideal situation. And I think there's more to protect Martin and just how things had snowballed on him and not wanting to be too passive. But it just happened so quickly that he got caught in between, like, do I let him go one batter too long, or do I bring in a reliever for not an ideal matchup? Because Hudson's splits, I don't think, are that crazy to where you're setting him up for failure. It just happened to be a very well-placed ball down the line, and that's what happened to do it. So based on this one start alone, like where his velocity was pretty close to what it is and seemed like he was locating everything well enough and he had his whole arsenal in play, it is easy to write it off as just an isolated occurrence versus like this larger pattern. I think the larger pattern is worth paying attention to and banking in your memory, just to have something to compare it to as you go along. But with how he looked in that 6th inning, it was a matter of just the worst possible luck with the usual vulnerabilities. I do think that we're seeing Martin, his ERA is regressing back to what it is in his career, which is like closer to 4. And I wonder how much of his just outstanding start of the season is coloring this conversation of him, because nobody would have expected him being like a game one or game two postseason starter. Just happened to be everything's come together a year earlier, and so you're playing with your hand you're dealt. Martin is a game one or game two, probably game two now, but probably not what a team wants ideally, probably more of a game three or game four. So you're having these conversations about like how good is Davis Martin, which is kind of a double-edged thing in that it's a compliment to the season he's having, but also maybe just puts him in a position where he's a very good developmental story to get where he's gotten if he is like a number three or number four starter. So it's more about mitigating that kind of pitcher versus Davis Martin, fallen from grace type conversation. I do think as the postseason nears, especially in September when rosters expand a little bit, and perhaps the White Sox have a bullpen guy or another bulk guy that they can go to, that you will see starts get shorter, and especially if they're in the postseason run to where every game matters, that you will see a lot more of October type managing where it is 2 times through at most, and then they're going to have somebody warming up no matter what because you can't get caught with your pants down. And I think that's what you might see if like September rolls around and it's a 2-game lead or a 2-game deficit, and you can't afford to give away winnable games to give guys rest or try to stretch somebody. You probably will see fifth inning more middle relievers or Sean Newcomb, well qualified long relievers or bulk relievers coming into play earlier and having more handedness imbalances, going from right to left or left to right, just in order to have whatever advantage you can get while guys are flagging.
Yeah, I have the same thought, Jim. And that's where I think maybe moving forward, everyone that covers the White Sox and White Sox fans just might need to accept the fact that Davis Martin could be limited to 85 pitches, not only to try to keep him as fresh as possible for the rest of the season, but also a matter of being effective. That clearly the numbers suggest that when you try to push him to 100 pitches, things start to break down. That doesn't seem to be the case for Sean Burke. So right now, out of this starting rotation for the White Sox, it really feels like who is the most confident that you could think of who can throw 6 innings for the White Sox right now. It's Sean Burke. So it may be just a rotation of 5 and fly guys, and then we'll see what the bullpen can do. But at least the White Sox do have some bulk guys in the bullpen, though, James, like Sean Newcomb, Chris Murphy at times if games go sideways. Tyler Schweitzer is still part of the White Sox bullpen as well. And I had a feeling that maybe Grant Taylor was going to be trying to push to 2 innings on Sunday before the White Sox offense exploded and gave a pretty big lead. So the bullpen may need to pick up more innings as we get closer to the postseason.
I mean, to a degree, I don't think you want to tax your core guys or expand their roles dramatically in some way. And Will Venable said just this weekend that he didn't think that Burke or Martin will really have innings caps this season. So now they're pretty stretched out, unless they're showing like some particular type of wear. I don't think they're just trying to taper them necessarily going into the postseason, because your bullpen will be plenty. You'll need them to be fresh for that, since they'll probably be the ones who have their roles expanded that time of year. I don't know if you want to like step on the gas in some systematic way before then. I certainly think like once you get in the postseason, once you're actually in those games, then like everyone has to be pretty much rolling to get a third time trip to the order. Everyone's like on watch in their second time, especially those early rounds where you're talking, your season mostly spinning on 1 or 2 games. I think it certainly happens there just organically from like the value of those individual innings and every single run. But as far as like thinking everybody's going to turn 5 and dive right now, if anything, I think the big thing they want at the deadline is to kind of remedy that and not be in that situation as often, because that makes it trickier to use Taylor, Newcomb back to back, and certainly like winning series sometimes can dictate that. So I certainly see that being like an element of their postseason strategy. But I think they're trying to fortify in a way that they don't have to necessarily just have the bullpen pitching half the game on a regular basis, because like that's not really sustainable. And I think there's too much year left to start acting like you're near the finish line.
Okay, that's fair. Then Davis is going to need to figure out what he can do, maybe post pitch 75, to avoid the trouble that we saw this weekend. But something to monitor as the White Sox start this new 13-game gauntlet that got a lot tougher for them. We'll be previewing the upcoming series at home against the New York Yankees, and then we're sending James down to Tampa Bay to cover that series between the White Sox and Rays. Trade deadline, 3 games in Boston, and then the Cleveland Guardians visit the White Sox. That's the next 13 games for the White Sox. So be interested to see how the starting rotation holds up, whether they can have the physical ability to go more than 85 pitches, to press through a third time to the order, but also are they still effective and games are not going sideways like it did on Friday for the White Sox. But a lot of factors played into that. And yeah, Sir Anthony Dominguez wasn't also very good on Friday either. It just made it things really lopsided when it didn't need to be, but something to pay attention to in future starts. Now for the Chicago White Sox, this weekend was a big weekend for Munetaka Murakami. Murakami got a sushi roll named after him at Rate Field. You can check out our Instagram at Sox Machine. I got a chance to try it, and a lot of fans have been buying the sushi roll at Rate Field. It's $23 per roll. You can find them in section 154 at the Lucky Stand, or there is a sushi cart that roams around the stadium. So he got a sushi roll, and then he got a bobblehead on Sunday. His parents were in attendance, and they threw out the first pitch. Lots of White Sox fans were in line waiting to get the Munetaka Murakami bobblehead. And Murakami had a huge game on his bobblehead day, in which he hit 2 homers for the second time. That's the second time this season he's had a multi-home run game, as Murakami went 3 for 5. He also drove in 6 RBIs for the White Sox. And as far as his season numbers now, he has 22 homers and 48 RBIs with a 378 on base percentage and slugging .543. So a big Sunday for Munetaka Murakami. And Jim, he's finally off the schneid. He finally hit a home run. Does it feel like the rust is breaking off with Murakami since he's returned off the injured list?
I think so. I think you saw over the course of like the 2 weeks that he was warming up, basically, was that early on, like he had the 4 strikeout game to start, a few hitless games in a row. But then he started seeing like the walks coming. You snapped his streak on Saturday. I think it was 9 games in a row with a walk. And you saw at least the plate discipline there to where like the swing decisions were fine. And he was making pitchers come to him. So he had that part of his game still intact. And then he saw the bat to ball starting to improve in terms of some, like he had that crush double. He had some better ground ball velocities. He had near homer. So you saw everything lining up towards him getting on time. And then, yeah, on Sunday, it just all came together for him. And it's odd that, or I shouldn't say odd, but you don't often see it be, I guess, that linear in terms of, he's warming up, he's getting closer, he's there. Like that's kind of how it seemed like over the course of the last 2 weeks of baseball play, was that he was kind of at sea early on, and then you just started seeing like, well, if he sticks with it, he should be rewarded. And then the reward came. So yeah, I think he's pretty close to where he was. I mean, he just needs to kind of do it for, maybe not 6 RBIs 3 games in a row, but in terms of just, I think this form he's shown like over the Houston series, I think extrapolate that to a couple more series, and all of a sudden he's back where he was.
Also happened this weekend, he missed on Sunday's game, but Colson Montgomery fouled off another tough pitch off of his shin. This is the second time it's happened in the last week. He ended up hitting a double on Saturday to drive in the White Sox only run. Well, I say double. It should have been a double. It ended up only being a single because Colson Montgomery was having a very tough time running down the first baseline. This is Colson Montgomery pregame on Sunday about how his lower leg feels and what he is thinking as far as a return back to the White Sox lineup.
the same spot?
It was above it. It didn't hit. So I have the regular leg guard, and then I had like a custom leg guard above the other one, and then it hit like right above it. Yeah, so I don't know. I think it was just the other spot was already still pretty inflamed and, tight and sore. So I think this one kind of hitting near it kind of just, pissed it off a little bit more.
Not in the lineup today. Do you expect this just to be like a one-day thing, or maybe a couple days? Or?
No, I anticipate I'm playing tomorrow. So, like I said, I think it's just something we need to get through today, do some not painful treatment, but kind of things just to flush out, swelling and things like that. But I anticipate I'm playing tomorrow.
James, you got a chance to chat with both Colson Montgomery and Will Venable as far as his status. It doesn't sound like he needs to go on the injured list, which is good because fouling off pitches in that area could be really tricky and concerning. Is it imperative that the White Sox or even Colson Montgomery try to push through and have him start playing on Monday?
I think I'd say objection leading the witness. If you said push through, well, that implies that, like, maybe he's not really ready, or he's going to be sore.
But he feels like he's ready. Like, I guess, do the White Sox have to protect him?
I mean, it seems like you don't want to say like a bruise is nothing because, William Pergoa just broke his leg. That was the exacerbation of whatever his situation was. Originally it was classified as a bruise, but it's, at least the way he's describing it, is it's more about it's a pain tolerance thing, and it's kind of like the tightness and the movement restriction that he experiences from the pain, and they're trying to flush it out over the course of, will be past tense by now, but he was getting treatment of that all Sunday. Colson's perspective is like, well, that's going to work and I'm going to feel better, so I'll be playing Monday. Whereas Will Venable was just being more diplomatic of saying like, well, it really got him good, so there's a chance it won't be all the way resolved in terms of how he feels and thus how he can move by Monday, and maybe he sits that day too. So I don't think it's necessarily like it's going to be like, well, he feels like crap, but we need this game, so he's going to play. It's more like, one is the athlete brain of like, yes, I'm going to do it. I can make this happen. We're going to get it done. And the other is the manager brain of like, well, there's actually, infinite possibilities always at hand, and you never know what's going to be. So I don't think it's like I think if he's limited again, it's not going to be, hey, play at 70%. Especially because we know like that can have like even if his at bats are fine, or he, obviously offers a power threat that the other team is the game plan more so or differently than they would for Luis Angel Acuna. You can see how he plays a very high demanding position at shortstop. If he can't move laterally, if he's just not as flexible as he normally is, that can affect him defensively in a way that can impact the game majorly. So I think it depends on how he feels. It doesn't seem like it's certainly not an IL situation, but I don't even necessarily think there's as much disagreement between what Colson is saying and what Venable is saying. It's more just the different perspectives on things. Like when like almost like even like we're waiting for more word on like the update on like what teal is, and like there's more tests that could change his like prognosis. And so I don't want to like say that it's not going to move around, but like the difference between like the manager saying 6 to 12 weeks and him saying 5 to 8 weeks could also just be like the same information, but also the athlete being like, okay, I'm going to get this done. I have the optimistic outlook on this. I'm going to max this out. That's just how they're wired. So they're always going to have like this kind of bullish estimation, like in any like equitable situation between team and player, how they see it differently. Like you lean towards the athlete probably being more optimistic. It's probably when the team is pushing someone out there that the player would be like, I don't know, I'll be back. But you so rarely ever hear that. It's almost like a red flag that something more is going on with that situation itself. You expect to hear like, I'm playing tomorrow from everybody. Like that's how these guys operate.
Well, hopefully Colson Montgomery takes it easy and stops fouling pitches off that shin, because a couple more times and it might get worse on him. So hopefully he does take the necessary rest if the White Sox do give him another day off on Monday. Max Fried of the New York Yankees is scheduled to make that start. We'll be talking about that series in a quick moment. Before we preview the series between the White Sox and Yankees, let's take a look around the American League Central. As far as the Cleveland Guardians, they have now lost 5 straight games as they just got swept in Tampa Bay. The Minnesota Twins won their series against the Sacramento Athletics, and the Detroit Tigers and Kansas City Royals ended up splitting the 4 games against each other. A bit of a disappointment for the Tigers. They won the first 2 games, but ended up losing games 3 and 4 in that series. So when you take a look at the American League Central standings, with that win for the White Sox on Sunday, they increased their lead to 2.5 games over the Cleveland Guardians with a 55 and 49 record. The Guardians are only a game above 500. The Twins are only a game below 500, meaning the Twins are just a game back of the Cleveland Guardians, so that's a bit of a surprise. The Tigers are 50 and 56. They're 6 games back of the White Sox, and the Royals are 11.5 games back at the bottom of the American League Central at 45 and 62. For White Sox fans, with the disappointing loss on Friday night, especially with Cleveland losing and the White Sox coughing up that 5-0 lead against the Astros, just felt like a missed opportunity to pad the lead in the American League Central. So losing this series to the Houston Astros, Jim, I'll start with you. Does this weekend feel like a missed opportunity for the White Sox to pad their lead in the American League Central?
Technically, yes. Just because 5-0, through with 4 innings to go is generally, I'm not sure what the win probability is, but I imagine it starts at the 9. So yeah, they did miss an opportunity to go up 3.5 games, but at this point, with still more than 2 full months in the season, I don't know if any one game matters so much to say it's a missed opportunity that they'll never be able to make it up. Watching the Guardians, I think they've scored, let me look. Yeah, they've scored 4 runs over their last 4 games, then shut out 2 games in a row against the Rays for 3 of those 4 games. Like the White Sox have that coming up, a weekend series against the Rays. So in terms of trying to figure out, schedules and strength of schedule and what the draw is in terms of head-to-head, like I think it's still a bit too early to break it down on a single game level. Like if they got swept, I think it might be a different conversation of just like, well, the Rays swept the Guardians and the White Sox, got swept by the Astros when 2 of those games was winnable. Cause we'll say the Sunday game that they theoretically lost in this conversation would have been one they were, had a chance to win as well. But I think winning that game, going away, kicking out of the pin, salvaging 1 out of 3, I think that keeps the ball moving. They're getting closer towards the goal. I think any weekend, any series where they finish better than they started is good enough, both in the very technical sense and also just this is a flawed team over a long season in a flawed division. So it is going to be ugly at times. And I think it's just mitigating or managing the ugliness that it doesn't break contain.
The American League, managing the ugliness. That's the season. That's the slogan for the 2026 season. James, I know Will Venables asked by other reporters in the scrums, getting a chance to, as far as cut those videos, which you can watch on youtube.com/Sox Machine. But it doesn't really seem like Venable or any of the White Sox players at this moment are pressing that, oh, we missed these opportunities, right? It seems like they're pretty level-headed still.
Yeah, I would say so. Every now and then, like Miguel Vargas probably was the only one who bit on the question post game Sunday about giving importance to being up in the standings. But even that, it seemed like it was him more framing just we think we're going to make the playoffs. We're gunning for that, and just acknowledging it as important rather than talking about scoreboard watching anyway. I don't know what you'd have to do to get Venable to talk about oh man, we're really stressed out of the standings or we're worried about these opportunities. He just is very I think it'd be a perfect example of just torture wouldn't work. You could pull out his fingernails. I don't think he'd admit to he simultaneously would be yeah, of course we look at them, but also be of course we're not talking about he got asked today did you talk to the team about the importance of not getting swept? He's no. They know we're here to win games. We're trying to win every game. They're all very important. I think they all know that. So I don't think he's gonna be oh man, this is a big opportunity. Cleveland's playing the Rays, or just even mentioning the standings as like a focus at all. They're simultaneously aware of it to the point where it's like demystified, but also not like their messages around like this series, this stretch is really important, because then you theoretically if you do have that sort of mindset, you see stretches like where you get up and play really well against the Dodgers and Braves, and then have a letdown against an opponent that maybe it seems like you should be able to handle. So I think they're not steering the ship towards that in any way. At the same time, it's not like a secret when you bring up what the standings are, or that they're in the division race. But they're also just like, we're a good team, we're gonna be in it, it's gonna be close to the end, come what may.
Yeah, and White Sox do control their own destiny. Maybe it's different if they were in the shoes of the Minnesota Twins, 3.5 games back. But no, the White Sox still have a 2.5 game lead in the American League Central, as now they continue as far as their homestand with 4 games against the New York Yankees. And the New York Yankees, as we are recording this, we're playing the Sunday night game against the Philadelphia Phillies. So the Yankees are either going to be 59-46 or 60-45. Before Sunday night's game, they had won their last 3, and they have won 7 of their last 10. And they have been a very good team away from Yankee Stadium this year. The Yankees are 33-22 prior to Sunday night's game against the Philadelphia Phillies. Your pitching probables for this series, Monday through Wednesday, these are 6:40 p.m. Central Time starts. So on Monday, it'll be a left-handed starter for the Yankees, Max Fried, against Noah Schultz of the Chicago White Sox. Game 2 is a tough one for the White Sox. It's Garrett Cole, who pitched very well against the White Sox in Yankee Stadium earlier this year, against Anthony Kay for the Chicago White Sox. On Wednesday, the White Sox didn't get a chance to see Cam Schlittler earlier this year. They will see him this time. Davis Martin will take the ball on Wednesday. And on Thursday, getaway day, this is a 1:10 p.m. Central Time start. Sean Burke will make the start for the White Sox against Ryan Weathers for the New York Yankees. So that's the pitching probables between the White Sox and the Yankees. And Noah Schultz will be getting another start. So we talked in great length about Noah Schultz in our previous episode. And you mentioned that he has to find his slider because he was just too hittable in his last outing. You got a chance to catch up with Noah and chat with him. What is his mindset coming into Monday night start against the Yankees?
Well, his mindset is quite interesting. He said, let me find it. He said like this, there's only one way to move in this situation. Pressure is a privilege. Fight or flight, natural selection, and people survive. You got to prove how you stand and sustain a position. So he's not underplaying the stakes. I think he was viewing it more in terms of like, they're in first place. There's immediate feedback in the major leagues. He was saying like it's kind of good. You can't get away with like things you're not doing well the way you could in like AA. That's kind of this immediate feedback. So like he appreciates it from a development standpoint rather than he's like speaking specifically to like the idea of like, if I don't do well, I'm optioned sort of a situation. I don't think it was like that. It was more like he understands that he's struggling. He understands that like the team has high stakes and, obviously you're hunting at the deadline. Like these guys are smart. They're aware of things. They're not like blithely like unaware of the news. But like I just think like he's very like, yeah, this is what I wanted. This is the sort of situation to be in where you have to prove yourself. Like it's kind of the boredom of the minor leagues that like everything doesn't really quite have the full stakes you want. You have to like press yourself to lock in the way you are up here. And I think guys like him and a lot of other major leaguers tend to enjoy like the constant feeling of like the stakes here. So it does seem like he's locked into that. Now, more brass tacks about like what goes into the game. Like their bullpen, talked to both Zach Bove and him about it, was about working on that slider. What was interesting is that Bove asked me, he started the conversation like, oh, you mean the curveball? And I was like, well, are you calling it the slider or the curveball? And he's like, well, he calls the slider, I call it the curveball. And I was like, well, why does that distinction, why does the distinction mean to you? And because is that emphasizing the shape that you want it to take? And he's saying, yes, we want something that drops. We want it to get to between -4 and -6 vertical, IBB is what he was shooting for. Because they, especially to right-handers, they feel like the east-west sweepier version is not getting misses and not getting enough ground balls, just weak contact, just not getting the results that they want. His miss rate on is not bad. I feel like it's probably mostly it's certainly higher left on left, but people are slugging really highly against it. They've been pushing earlier, like, hey, let's have a more vertical shape against right-handers, and then you can still throw the east-west sweepy version against lefties of your breaking ball. Now there's just like, let's get the brass tacks, let's simplify things for him, let's have one breaking pitch and just try to repeat it. And so what they're going for is like, if we're going to have one breaking pitch, well, let's have the one that works against righties and assume it'll work against lefties too. And so that's like, think of it as a curveball. We're trying to get all this negative vert action on it. So that's kind of the idea of, one, Noah seems geared up for this. I think it's fair to say. And two, like, they did spend the bullpen hammering on the slider, and he said like they're looking at his mechanics from early in the year as far as what they're trying to replicate for his delivery. Obviously, we're gonna speculate on here and like, is he 100% because he had the IL stint earlier this year?
Sure.
I think even if like obviously he's out there and he's saying he's good to go, take it as word. When you go through that, there's a natural inclination to compensate your mechanics or make adjustments from going through when you were in pain that you still have to work through and still have to hammer out in your reps, even if you're not feeling the injury anymore. And I think Tanner McDougal was like a great example of that when he was talking about, I had the hamstring strain and then I was fine and was cleared, but I was still throwing like I was compensating from a hamstring strain my next time out, and that's how I injured my flexor. So, and I can recall like conversations with Lance Lynn about this after he had the surgery, who was just like, there's still so many habits in my delivery that I'm like still trying to hammer out that I started building up because I was pitching through like the issue with the knee that eventually required this. So I think like him struggling mechanically, that's an explanation for it that tracks. Obviously remains to be seen, like how can they get him on track? How much can they kind of hammer it out through midweek bullpen sessions and whatnot? And do we see it immediately in outings? And are we hitting up near his career high in innings already? And how do they handle that? And there's other moving parts as part of that, but that's at least like where they're targeting midweek with that session they have to kind of get him right.
All right, so something to watch for podcast listeners on that Monday start for Noah Schultz is how well his slider or curve or slurve, whatever they're calling this pitch, how effective it is. The good news for Noah Schultz, he will not have to face Cody Bellinger or Aaron Judge. Both will be missing this series. And then on the offensive side, Jim, this is a tough test, especially when you look at the probable starters for the New York Yankees. And the way I'm kind of looking at it is, this is a good test to see just how postseason ready this White Sox lineup is. And yes, they don't have Kyle Teal, so they're not at full strength, but I guess I'm a little cautiously optimistic, but I am intrigued in how well this White Sox lineup does against these starting pitchers for the Yankees, now that they're going to be facing the top arms in their starting rotation.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with Fried, who's lefty, and we're seeing that Junior Perez is being optioned. So it's a matter of, is it Hayes or Pereira? And either one of those guys has been missing from the lineup, has been missing from outfield configuration. So I think that's going to be something to where if they're looking for, deadline help or what have you from the right side, one game is not enough to say, Hayes is fixed or Hayes is washed or Pereira, same thing. But it will be a case of like, how deep does this lineup look? How challenging or how much of a challenge do they present to a lefty starter? It's kind of what I'm looking at Monday. And then when it comes to Colin and Schlittler, it's just they're good righties. They're good postseason pitchers, like game one or game two. Like, I mean, the Yankees are deep enough to where like one of them might be game three, depending on how what kind of form Cole rounds into by the end of the year. But it's a case where Murakami, like this would be a good time for his improvement to continue on that nice, smooth, linear path to be that middle of the order threat, the way that Ben Rice is right now for the Yankees, of just having that middle of the order masher. I think maybe if anything, this is a case where you're having Colson not at 100% or close to 100% maybe hurts them, because when you have the White Sox lineup against lefties, you think, okay, Miguel Vargas has to have a big series. when you have the White Sox lined up against righties, you think, okay, it's Murakami, Montgomery. Like those are the 3, 4, 5 guys who have to step up. And so like without Montgomery being either active, we'll see if he plays Monday, or just you're not expecting him to, you're just expecting him to weather through it right now versus flip the switch and be back to 95, 100% overnight. That's where you might see just being one bat short or being one thumper away. So I think it's a good test. I think it's probably more a matter of testing just the depth of their lineup against lefties. And then for a matter of like Murakami, I think that's probably what I'm looking at most, is just how does he look? Because no matter what, like when you get to September, when you get to October, against teams that have this 1, 2, 3, he's going to be in the middle of it. And he is their biggest threat for instant offense. And so it's fun. Like this is what you sign up for when you're following a team that all of a sudden every game matters, or every series matters, or they can't take a series off. Or you can't necessarily, say like, oh, it was a tough series and we'll look to rebound, just because like you never know what's going to happen on the other, for the other teams that are chasing. So fun stuff when you have 1, 2, 3 like this for the Yankees in whatever order, and the White Sox are expected to respond and have a game plan for them and produce.
Well, again, you could be able to read the recaps on SoxMachine.com. James will be there covering the games for us. So there'll be more pre and post game videos as well on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine. Of course, we'll be recapping the White Sox and Yankees podcast in an upcoming episode of the Sox Machine podcast that will be released on Friday, to see just how the White Sox fare on both the pitching and hitting side. This is a real tough test for the Chicago White Sox, as we're just a week away from the MLB trade deadline. But we do have a special episode coming midweek. The Chicago White Sox director of hitting, Ryan Fuller, sat down with James Fegan to talk about the plans that the White Sox have with their recent draftees, with Rock Chalowski and Landon Tomey. So if you want to learn more about the adjustments the White Sox have already been making with those prospects, along with Cole Prosek as well, definitely watch and listen to that episode as it's released on Wednesday morning. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching to this episode. If you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. If you are watching the show, and this is the first time you have watched the show, please hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. We would greatly appreciate that. With James being at the stadium, and of course, we are expecting, knock on wood, more trade news from the Chicago White Sox. Make sure to follow us on social media. We're on all the social media platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. And if you want full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox and Major League Baseball, sign up to become a Sox Machine subscriber at SoxMachine.com/products. We are still continuing to run our sale. So our $5 a month plan is just 53 cents for the first month, and then it goes up to $5 in the second month. But if you sign up as a Sox Machine subscriber, you unlock all of our coverage, the comment section. You can also get an ad-free version of the website as well. We also have additional tiers of support to give you additional benefits, and even an opportunity to join our Veterans Committee, in which you have direct access to Jim and James, be part of the group chat. So when we are hearing gossip, whispers, gossipers, you're the first one to know. So again, if you're interested, go to SoxMachine.com/products and sign up today. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Foul Territory Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.